crochet pattern, you're going to need your 5mm crochet hook, as well as a pair of scissors and your darning needle or tapestry needle. You can choose whatever colors that you want for your blanket. This one I did in a really pretty pastel pink, and you can see here's your little tulip, and then here's the little tulip, and then here's the little leaf or for the flower, and then here's another one right here. So I call this my little tiny tulips because it looks like little tulips all throughout. Now on video tutorial, I'm going to be showing how to make the same blanket using a variegated blue yarn this time. So you can choose whatever fun colors that you want. And I chose Bernat Baby Sport, but you can use whatever baby yarn that you want. For this pattern, I'm using one full skein of this yarn for this blanket. Now for my other blanket, I'll give you the measurements and I'll show you how to change the size. To change the size of this one, you need to make it a multiple of 4 plus 1. So if you want to make it larger, like my pink one, I'll give the measurements as well for the size of these, so you can change them to the size that you want. But if you make the pink one, I used 2 skeins of the Bernat Baby Sport. I didn't completely use up the second skein, so I'll be able to use that for something else. And you're also going to need a white colored yarn, and I used Bernat Baby Sport again for the border, and again you're going to have a lot left over of that yarn. So in video tutorial, I'm only using one main color for the baby blanket of this skein of yarn, and then 1 skein for the border. And again, for the border, you're not going to completely use up this skein. So if you're using a different type of yarn, this is 816 meters or 892 yards. So you'll know how much yarn that you're going to need. It's a light 3 yarn, and the color of this one is Funny Prince, and I just like using the Bernat Baby Sport for the value that you get. And I didn't know it made Women's Choice Award, 9 out of 10 recommended baby yarns, 2016 and 2017. So now go ahead and grab whatever color yarn that you're using for the main color of your baby blanket, and I'm starting with a chain of 129. So if you're making the same size baby blanket as me for the variegated blues and the greens, then you're going to start with a chain of 129. And like I said, if you're changing the size, it would be a multiple of 4 and then just add 1. So my multiple of 4 was 128, and then I added 1 to start with a chain of 129. So just take your yarn, and then you're going to fold it over on itself to form a loop, and then take your crochet hook, go right through the loop, hold the base of the loop with your middle finger and your thumb. Then just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and then go through the loop for a slip knot. And then go ahead and cinch that knot down, and then cinch the loop around your crochet hook, and then you're ready to start making your starting chain. So again, my starting chain is 129. I'm just going to show 4 of them on video tutorial. So just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and go through the loop for 1, 2, 3, 4. So go ahead, finish your starting chain, and again mine is a chain of 129. After you finish your starting chain, and again I had a chain of 129, then you're going to take and make a double crochet into the 6th chain from the hook. So you're going to count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you're going to make a double crochet into that 6th chain from the hook. So just yarn over and then go into that 6th chain from the hook, and then bring up a loop, and then complete a double crochet. Then you're going to make one more double crochet into the same stitch. So just yarn over and then go into the same stitch, bring up a loop, and then complete your double crochet. And then you're going to make what's called a picot stitch. And you can have different sizes for your picot stitch. A lot of times I see a chain 3 for the picot stitch, and they make great borders for blankets. But for this baby blanket, for the picot stitch, and the picot is spelled P-I-C-O-T, we're going to make a chain of 5. So make a chain of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you're going to make a slip stitch into the first chain that you made. So take your crochet hook, go into that first chain that you made, and then you're going to make a slip stitch. So you just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and then bring the yarn through both loops on your crochet hook to complete your picot stitch. Then you're going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. So you just yarn over, go into the same stitch, bring up a loop, and then complete your double crochet. And then you're going to make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then you just finished your first little tulip or tiny tulip. So 2 double crochet, your picot stitch, and 2 double crochet. Then you're going to skip 3 stitches on your starting chain. So just count 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then make a double crochet into the 4th stitch. So you just yarn over, go into that 4th stitch, bring up a loop, and then you're going to make your double crochet. And then you're going to make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then you're going to chain 5. And then make a slip stitch into that first chain that you made to complete your picot stitch. And then 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then you're going to repeat this pattern all the way across. So that was my second tiny tulip. Now you're going to skip 3 more stitches on your starting chain and then make a double crochet into that 4th stitch. And then you're going to make another double crochet into the same stitch. And then you're going to make your picot stitch. So you're going to chain 5. And then you're going to make a slip stitch into that first chain that you made. So go into that first chain, make your slip stitch, and then you're going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then that's your 3rd tulip. So I'm going to show you 1 more, and then I'll let you finish making your tiny tulips all the way across. So you're going to skip 3 stitches on your starting chain and make a double crochet into the 4th chain. So yarn over, go into that 4th stitch, bring up a loop, complete your double crochet, and then you're going to make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch, And then you're going to make your picot stitch, so chain 5. Then you're going to make a slip stitch into that first chain that you made. And then 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. So go ahead, finish making your tiny tulips all the way across until you have 2 stitches remaining on your starting chain, and then come back. So I just finished my last tiny tulip, and I actually have 3 stitches left, which is fine. Go ahead and skip any of the remaining stitches, 2 or 3 stitches, and just make a double crochet into that last stitch on the end. Then, to move up to the next row, you're going to chain 3. Then just turn your work, and we're going to head back across. So now, to start this next row, you're going to make 2 double crochet into the same stitch as your chain 3. So go into that same stitch and just make 2 double crochet into the same stitch. So as we make our rows, you can see how this first row has only 1 double crochet, the second row has 3, the next row will only have 1, but we'll get to that. So we're going to be alternating 1 double crochet, 3 double crochet for each of the rows. So for now, we're working the 3 double crochet row. So then, after you make the 3, that first chain 3 counts as your first double crochet, and then after you make the total of 3, you're going to skip the previous row's tiny tulip, and you're going to work in the space between the 2 tiny tulips. So in this space right here. So you're going to make a double crochet into that space. And then you're going to make 1 more double crochet. And then you're going to make your chain 5 picot. Slip stitch into that first chain that you made. And then 2 more double crochet into the same space to complete your tiny tulip. And then you're just going to go in between each of your tiny tulips from the previous row and just make a tiny tulip. So that would consist of 2 double crochets, your chain 5 picot stitch, and then 2 double crochets in the same space. And then this is how your work is going to look. And you're going to repeat this all the way across. When you get to the end, come back and I'll help you move up to the next row. So this is how my work is looking so far. I have all my little tulips and then my tulips from the previous row. So now I've reached the end. I'm going to skip over that last tulip and then I'm going to make 3 double crochet into that double crochet on the end. So you can see how I went into that top stitch of that double crochet on the end, and then I'm going to make my double crochet. And you can see how I have my tiny tulip here. I skipped over the tiny tulip from the previous row and then made a double crochet into the top stitch of the double crochet stitch on the end from the previous row. Now I need 2 more double crochet in the same stitch. So you can always tell how many double crochet that you're going to make on the end, because the previous row was only 1 double crochet, so this is a 3 double crochet. So the next row will be 1 double crochet. So to start the next row, you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then just turn your work, and then you're ready to start your 3rd row. So you're going to be alternating these 2 rows, so the 1st row and the 2nd row for the whole blanket. So it's that simple. I love this pattern. So now what you're going to do is, because the previous row was a 3 double crochet, you're going to go into the space between the 3 double crochet and the tiny tulip. So these tiny tulips will line up as you crochet the blanket. So I'm going to make a double crochet into this space between the 3 double crochet from the previous row and the tiny tulip from the previous row. And I'm going to make my double crochet. I'm going to make 1 more double crochet. Then I'm going to chain 5 and make my picot stitch, and then make 2 more double crochet into the same space. And this is how my work looks. So I started with the chain 3, so I have 1 double crochet, then I have my tiny tulip. I'm going to skip the next tiny tulip from the previous row, and then make my tiny tulip between the 2 tiny tulips from the previous row. And then you're just going to repeat this all the way across. And then you just keep repeating that pattern, the 1st row and the 2nd row. And remember, you're always going to end and start the same way. So if you start with your double crochet, you'll end with a double crochet. The next row will have 3 double crochet to start, and then you'll end with 3 double crochet for that row. Then the next row you'll start with your double crochet, and you'll end with 1 double crochet. Now I've reached the end, and I have a space before the 3 double crochet to end the row. So I'm going to make 1 more tiny tulip in that space. So there's my chain 5. I'm going to make my picot stitch, and then 2 more double crochet, and then to end the row you're going to make 1 double crochet into the last double crochet stitch. So again, I just want to point out that the first row had the 1 double crochet, the second row had the 3 double crochet. Now the next row will have the 1 double crochet. So you're going to be alternating 1 double crochet, 3 double crochet, and alternating those 2 rows as you complete your blanket. So now, since the last row was a 1 double crochet, I'm going to chain 3. And then I'm going to turn my work. And then I'm going to start this row with the 3 double crochet. And you'll see that your little petunias will be lining up. So this one will be lining up with the next one, and then these line up. So if you know you're making them correctly if your little petunias are lining up like they should. So now I'm going to start my next row. So I know I need 3 double crochet to start because my previous row was a 1 double crochet to start. And each time with the 3 double crochet, you're going to be skipping over a petunia to make your petunia. And then with the 1 double crochet, you're going to have the tiny tulip right next to it. And that's how easy it is to crochet this blanket. So I'm going to make my picot stitch, and then I'm going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch to complete the little tiny tulip. So for my blue blanket, I decided to stop after 59 rows. You could see the little flowers, the little tulips, tiny tulips are turning out really pretty for this blanket. I love the look that it creates. And I stopped after 59 rows, which gives me the main color measurements of 26.5 inches by 38.5 inches, which gives me plenty of baby blanket with enough of my second skein left over to make the border as well as a hat, a matching hat, and the matching sweater. So after we're going to make a single crochet border for this blanket using the same color. So that should give us enough of the second skein for that. And then you can decide if you want to use your second skein, like me, for another border with the tiny tulips and then change to your alternate color. But if you want to save as much of this color as you want, you can, after the single crochet border, you can change colors at that time. And I'll point that out when we get to that point. But for this part of the crochet project, for the border, I would recommend using the same colored yarn like I am. So I finished the 59th row, and that's my last tiny tulip of the row and my last double crochet on the end. So now I'm going to go ahead and chain 1, and then I'm going to turn my work. So this is the top of the blanket where I have my tulips. So I'm going to turn the blanket to start working down the side of the baby blanket towards the bottom. So now I'm working down the side. So we're going to evenly space our single crochets along the side of the blanket. So I know that I ended that row with a double crochet. So I chained 1, so that counts as my first stitch down the side. Now I'm going to make 1 single crochet into that double crochet space on the side. So that counts as 2 stitches for that double crochet space. Then I'm going to go into the next double crochet space, and you can see that I have 3 double crochets here, but I'm going to work into that 1 double crochet space. So I'm going to go into that space and I'm going to bring up a loop, and I'm going to make 2 single crochet into that same double crochet space. So then in each of the double crochet spaces down the side, you're going to place 2 single crochets. So here's the next double crochet space. So I'm going to make 2 single crochet into that space. And you're going to repeat this all the way down the side. So now I have my 3 double crochet. I'm going to go just into the 1 double crochet space on the end and make my 2 single crochet. I'm just going to work a couple of them with you so you can see how I'm making my single crochets. So now I'm going into the next double crochet space, and I'm making 2 single crochet into the same space, and I'm just repeating that all the way down the side to the bottom of the blanket. So when you reach the bottom of the blanket, come back, and then I'll show you what to do next. So this is what mine looks like along the side of the blanket, and I've reached the last double crochet on the side before I'm at the bottom of the blanket. So I'm going to go ahead and make my last 2 single crochet into that double crochet space along the side, and then I'm going to turn my work so that the bottom is facing me. And then the bottom's easy because it's a 1-to-1 stitch. So just grab your loose yarn end, because you're going to bury it as you crochet, and then go into the first stitch on the bottom, and then go behind the loose yarn end and just make 1 single crochet into each stitch along the bottom of the blanket. So it's 1-to-1. And then when you reach the side, the opposite side, come back and then I'll help you turn that corner. But along the bottom, like I said, it's really easy. You just take and make 1 single crochet in every stitch across the bottom. So now I've reached the end, and I'm going to turn the corner again. So I'm going to put 1 last stitch on the end, and I'm going to go ahead and go into that double crochet space on the side to put my stitch on the end. And then I'm going to turn my work so that I'm working down the side of the opposite side of the blanket. And then you're just going to crochet it the same way. So here's my first double crochet on its side. So I'm going to place 2 single crochet into that space on the side. And then I'm going to go to the next double crochet space and then make 2 single crochet in that space. And I'm going to keep making 2 single crochet into each double crochet space on the side, just like I did on the opposite side, until I reach the top. And when you reach the top, come back, and then I'll show you how I made the single crochet across the top of the blanket. So it's going to be a little bit different across the top because we have the tiny tulips across the top. So when you come back, I'll show you what to do. across the top. So I just finished my 2 single crochet on the opposite side, and that brings me to the top of the blanket. So you can go ahead and position your blanket so you're working across the top. And you can see that I have my tiny tulips going across the top. So I just finished the side. So now I'm going to go ahead and make a single crochet into the first stitch along the top. So just go right into that first stitch and make a single crochet. And then you're just going to make 1 single crochet into each stitch across the top until you get to the little picot stitch that we made. So you know you have 2 double crochet before the picot stitch. So go ahead and fold the picot stitch down, and then you're going to chain 1, hold the picot stitch down after you make your chain of 1, and then just go to the first stitch after the picot stitch, and it should be in the double crochet. And just make your single crochet. And that way your picot stitch will be towards the front of the blanket. And then just make a single crochet into that last double crochet. So I'm going to repeat this so you can see it again. So I'm going to make 1 single crochet into each stitch before I get to the picot stitch. And you know that there's 2 double crochets, so there should be 2 single crochet before the picot stitch. And then you can go ahead and just chain 1. And then just kind of fold the picot stitch over to the side so you can see the first double crochet along the top after the picot stitch. And then just go into that stitch with your crochet hook and then make a single crochet. And then make a single crochet into the last double crochet. And that way, behind each of your picot stitches, you'll have a single crochet stitch, just 1. And then your picot stitch flower will still be on the front of the blanket. So I'm going to repeat this one more time with you, and then you're going to repeat this all the way across the top of the blanket. So I'm going to chain 1 now, and then I'm going to go into the double crochet right after the picot stitch, and then make a single crochet, and then I'm going to make a single crochet into the last double crochet. And then just continue making your single crochets across the top of the blanket. So now, after we finished making the single crochet stitches all across the top, we're ready to make the little tulip border design. So I just finished my last single crochet along the top, and now I'm just going to turn my work so I'm working down the side of the blanket. So now we're going to start the border. So we're in the corner, and we're going to start with the design in the corner. So we're going to make a tulip in the corner. Go ahead and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. That counts as your first double crochet for the tulips. You're going to make 1 more double crochet into the corner. And then you're going to chain 5. And then make a slip stitch into the base of the chain 5 stitches to complete the picot stitch. And then make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then, just like in the blanket, you have your completed picot stitch. And we're going to make picot stitches like this all around the blanket. So all around the blanket, you're going to make it the same way. You're going to skip 3 stitches and then make your little tulip into the 4th stitch. So I'm going to start with a double crochet. And then I need another double crochet in the same stitch. And then make your picot stitch. And then 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. And you're going to repeat this pattern all the way around. And when you reach the bottom, after completing one side, come back and I'll help you move across the bottom. So you're going to skip 3 stitches and then make your your tiny tulip into the 4th stitch. So 2 double crochet, chain 5, slip stitch into the first chain that you made, and then 2 double crochet into the same stitch. So go ahead, repeat this pattern, and when you reach the bottom, come back, and then I'll show you how I turned and made the tiny tulips across the bottom. So now I finished working my tiny tulips all down the side, and I'm at the corner. I want to make sure that I have a tiny tulip right on the corner. So I finished my last tiny tulip on the side, and I skipped 3 stitches and made it into the 4th. So now I only have 2 stitches before the corner stitch. So I'm only going to skip the last 2 stitches so that I make a tiny tulip into the corner. So you can see how I made a tiny tulip on the corner. And then I'm going to skip 2 stitches and then make a tiny tulip on the bottom of the blanket. So that's how you would crochet around the corners. If you need to skip only 2 stitches instead, then you would do that. And then you would resume skipping 3 stitches after that to make your tiny tulip into the 4th stitch. So go ahead, finish making your tiny tulips all the way around the border of the blanket, and then come back when you reach the beginning where we started. So now I finished my last tiny tulip across the top, and I'm back to the corner tulip that I made. So now you can make a slip stitch into that top stitch of the first chain 3 you made in the first corner tulip. So just go into that top stitch and then just yarn over, and then just pull the yarn through both loops on your crochet hook to complete that round. So now you can make another round with this same color if you want, but I'm going to change colors now. So if you were to continue using this same color, then you would chain 3 and then make your corner tulip, and I would make the corner tulip in between the two tulips where you finished and where you started, and then continue in between each of the tulips the same way that I'm going to do with this alternate color. So for now I'm going to change colors. I'm going to finish off, just yarn over and then just pull enough yarn through to bury into your work. And then I'm going to join my alternate color and then crochet with it the same way that I would have if I would have kept the same color. So now I'm going to take my alternate color and I'm going to join between the two tiny tulips where I finished off and the first corner tulip. So you want to go right in between the two and then bring up a loop with your alternate color. In this case I'm using my white Bernat Baby Sport yarn, and then I'm just going to yarn over and bring the yarn through, and then I'm going to take and tie a knot. And then you can bury these loose yarn ends later. So now I'm in the corner and I'm also in between the tulip end tulip along the top and the first tulip, tiny tulip, along the side. So I'm right in between the two. And I'm going to make a tulip. So the first thing I'm going to do is chain 3. And then that will count as my first double crochet. Then I'm going to make another double crochet into the same stitch. And then I'm going to make my chain 5 picot stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then just slip stitch into the first chain that you made in the picot stitch. And then 2 double crochet into the same stitch. So the same thing we've been doing for our tiny tulip. And then you finish the tiny tulip in the corner. And then you're just going to go in between each of the tiny tulips. So I'm going to skip over the next tiny tulip and then go right between along the side and then just make my tiny tulip. So go ahead, finish making your tiny tulips right between the previous row's tiny tulips. And when you reach the bottom, come back, and then I'll help you turn that corner and complete your tiny tulips around the corner to the bottom of the blanket. I'm just going to finish this one with you. So now I've finished going down the side and I've reached the corner. I'm just going to go ahead and I only made one tiny tulip on the end of the side, and then the corner stitch I'm going to skip right over it and then just make my picot stitch into the next space between. So I didn't make any extra stitches for that corner stitch. And this is how it looks. So then you just continue around the corner, making your picot stitches. And you're going to continue this pattern all the way around back to where we started. Then when you get back to the first tiny tulip that you made, you just make a slip stitch into the top stitch of that first chain 3, Then you can go ahead and finish off. Just yarn over and pull enough yarn through to bury into your work. Then you can just take your darning needle or your tapestry needle, put the loose yarn end onto the needle, and then just kind of weave it through your work. And I like to go to the base of the tulips and then just weave the work in the thicker part of the yarn. And I go through twice or even one more time too, and just make sure that it's really buried. And then I just cut the loose yarn end. Then it's less likely for the blanket to come undone. And then you have a neat border where you finished. So go ahead and bury any of your loose yarn ends and then you're all finished. Here's the finished blanket, and it measures 43 inches in length and 30 inches in width. And here's a close-up of the design. Now the petals actually run in this direction. So there are the petals. So here's the flower, and then here are the leaves of the tiny tulips. And then the tiny tulip pattern goes all around the border as well. I put one in the main color of the blanket and then one with the white alternate color. Another fun design that you can use for the tiny tulip pattern is with this Yarnspirations Bernat Pipsqueak stripes that I discovered. And you can see how the blanket is turning out really beautiful. And it's really soft. And it looks like it's hard to crochet, but it's actually pretty easy with the tiny tulip pattern. But I used a 6mm crochet hook with this style of yarn. I do show at the end of the tiny tulip video tutorial how I crocheted with this yarn, so you'll see me crocheting with this yarn to show you how I do it. And like I said, it looks difficult, but it's actually very easy to crochet. But for beginners, I would recommend starting with the Bernat Baby Sport yarn first, or even the Lion brand Pound of Love. So this one, if you don't want to use quite as big of a blanket like me, I'm going to make some smaller ones too. This one is 39 inches in length, and you can see how much I have left over. So this is how much one skein will make. So I'm actually going to use a total of 4 skeins for this blanket. So if you don't want to use that many skeins, you can make a smaller security or stroller blanket instead. So I was at the store when I saw this gorgeous yarn, and it comes in different colors. I liked this particular color, and I also loved the pink color. So I got one with more of a girly pink and then the blue-green one. So I'm going to show you how, you know how I am with the Pipsqueak yarn. I love Pipsqueak yarn, and I have used it for my small teddy sleepy bear, crochet sleepy bear. So I also show in that video tutorial how to use this yarn. This would be really cute with the crochet sleepy bear. So this type of yarn is a little bit more difficult, so I would recommend starting out with Bernat Baby Sport yarn for practice, and then you can move on to this particular style of yarn. So this yarn is by Yarnspirations Bernat Pipsqueak Stripes, and here's some information about this yarn. It's 260 meters, 284 yards, 9.8 ounces, 100% polyester. The color of this one is Boxcar, and the color of the pink one was Lullaby. So this one is Boxcar. So I'm going to show you how I crocheted with this yarn to make the same blanket. So my little tiny tulip blanket. If you're a beginner, I would recommend starting with this yarn. That way you know the pattern and you know how to crochet it, because when you use this particular style yarn, it's more difficult to see the crochet stitches. You're not going to be able to see them. So I would recommend practicing with the Bernat Baby Sport yarn first. Also, to make it easier, I use my 6mm crochet hook instead of, with the Bernat Baby Sport, I used my 5mm crochet hook. So I'm using a slightly larger one with my 6mm crochet hook. So my starting chain is going to be a little bit different with this style of yarn. So as you're aware, different yarn choice and different crochet hook choice can affect the size of your blanket. So with this blanket, I'm going to start with a chain of 89. So if you want a different size baby blanket, remember for this particular pattern that I'm going to show you, it's a multiple of 4 plus 1. So I'm just going to show you how I crochet with this style of yarn. So the first thing I'm going to do is just fold it over on itself to form a loop. And then I take my 6mm crochet hook and go right through the loop. Hold the base of the loop with your middle finger and your thumb, and then just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and then go through the loop for a slip knot. Go ahead and cinch that knot down, and then you're just going to cinch the loop around your crochet hook. Then you're going to start making your chains. So I'm just going to show a few of them on video tutorial, and then I'll let you finish yours. Again, I'm making a chain of 89 if you want the same size baby blanket. So you just yarn over, turn the hook upside down, and bring the yarn through the loop. And that's your first chain, your second chain. And you don't want your stitches tight with this one. So you want a fairly loose loop. Not too loose, but loose enough to where you can kind of feel and see your stitches, but as you can see, it's going to be difficult because you can't really see the stitches. You just know that they're there. So there's 3. And then I just loosely, I don't make the stitches too tight, and then I just make the chain for the size baby blanket that I want. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And with a chain of 10, my board here, the little blocks are about 1 inch. So you can see that 2, 4, 6. Well, this is a chain of 10, so that's about 4 inches for a chain of 10. Kind of a guide for you. So that's how you make your chains. And again, I'm making a chain of 89. So I finished my chain of 89. Now this pattern is made the exact same way as my tiny little tulip pattern. So you're going to be following the exact same way. Now this pattern, using this yarn, it's the only hard part will be this first initial part, because the rest of it will be working between your tiny little tulips, which will be easy with this style of yarn. So the only hard part of it will be the first part of it where you're setting up your little tiny little tulips, because it's hard to see your chains. So for the first step, you're going to be counting back 6 chains. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're kind of guessing where your 6th chain will be. You can kind of feel it, but it's still hard. So you would yarn over, and then you would go into your 6th chain from the hook, and then bring up a loop, and then just complete your double crochet. And then you're going to make 1 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then you're going to make your chain 5 picot stitch. So I'm going to make a slip stitch into that first chain that I made. And then I'm going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. So I really love using this yarn because it's just so soft. But a lot of people don't like to use it because that it's so difficult to see the stitches. So then you're going to kind of, for me, I think the reason why I can work with this yarn is I'm not very particular about making sure that it's absolutely 3 stitches that I'm skipping. I may skip 4, or I may even skip 2, but I try to skip 3 stitches. So that's probably why I can work with this yarn. So I'm going to kind of guess there's 1, 2, 3. So here's about the 4th stitch. I'm going to make a double crochet into that stitch. So you're skipping 3 stitches, and then you're making your double crochet. And then you're going to make your tiny tulip in that stitch. So you'll make 1 more in that same stitch. And then you just make your chain 5. And then you just kind of slip stitch into that first chain that you made. And then you make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. And then you're just going to repeat this pattern all the way across to the end. So you're going to skip 3 stitches again on the starting chain. So there's about, and sometimes you can feel it too. So there's about 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go into the 4th stitch and make my double crochet. 2 double crochet in the same stitch. And then my picot, chain 5. Oops, I need to make, I'll just make 1 more. And then slip stitch into the first stitch, and then 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. And you're just going to repeat this pattern all the way across, and then come back. So this is how mine looks, and I've reached the end, and I have about, I would say maybe 2-3 stitches left, which is exactly what I wanted. But if you have 1 or 2 more, that's okay, because you'll just skip them and then work into the last stitch. So I had approximately 25 of these little tiny tulips, and this is what it looks like. And you may have a different number, and that's okay, because like I said, it's hard to see those stitches on that starting chain, so it's going to be hard to get an exact count every time, so you may vary slightly. And this is what mine looks like. So now it gets a little bit easier, because you just have to work between the tiny tulips. So the gap between is very easy to see, so you can't miss it. So that's why it's a little bit easier from now on. So the same way that we made the tiny tulips with the Bernat Baby Sport yarn, you're still going to have the 1 double crochet on the end for your starting row, and then you're going to have 3 double crochet for the next row, and then you're just going to alternate 1 double crochet on the end and then 3 double crochet on the end. So you're alternating those two row patterns. So the same thing is going to happen with the use of the Pipsqueak, Bernat Pipsqueak yarn. So you're going to end this row with a double crochet in the last stitch. So you just make a double crochet into the last stitch, and then we're going to move up to the next row. So you know that you ended with 1 double crochet for your first row, So your second row is going to start with 3 double crochet. So to start the second row, you're going to start with a chain of 3. Oop, I just realized I grabbed my wrong crochet hook. Let me bring my right crochet hook back. Okay, so now we're going to move up to the next row. So we know that the previous row was 1 double crochet that we ended with. So we're going to start with a chain of 3. 1, 2, 3. And then go ahead and turn your work. And then that first chain 3 counts as your first double crochet for the second row. So I'm not counting that first starting chain as a row. I'm going to refer to that as a starting chain. And we just finished 1 row. And now we're moving up to the second row. So for the second row, I'm going to make 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. So I'm starting this row with the 3 double crochet. And then you're just going to make your tiny tulips between each of the tiny tulips from the previous row. So you just yarn over and then you go into that space between the 2 tulips. So here is 1 tiny tulip, and then here's the space that we're going to crochet into, and then your second tiny tulip. So I'm going to go into that space between the tiny tulips and bring up a loop, and then complete my double crochet. And then I'm going to make 1 more double crochet in the same space. And then I'm going to make my chain 5 picot stitch. And then slip stitch into that first chain that I made. And then 2 more double crochet in the same space to complete the tiny tulip. And then it's just really easy from now on, and you just create this really soft baby blanket. So again, I'm going to go between the next 2 tiny tulips from the previous row. And then make another one, a tiny tulip. So 2 double crochet, chain 5 for the picot, slip stitch into that first chain that you made, and then 2 more double crochet into the same space. So that's how you crochet with this style of yarn. So it's not that hard once you get used to it. And I just love how soft the items that you can crochet, and then most people are just surprised that it is even crochet because you can't see the stitches.